Hey, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Power Briefing. I'm Howard Cleaver with O3 Energy in Dallas, Texas. Today we have with us Courtland Robinson. He's with Brasfield and Gorrie. Did I get that right, Courtland? That's
Yes,
an
you did.
interesting name there. Yeah. He's got an interesting background. He's been in the energy business in the past. And now he's focused on center construction. So, that's a hot topic with everybody out there, particularly for those of us in the energy field. And those are big energy users. Everybody's using, the new AI tools out there. So this is a very interesting time to have this conversation. So let's welcome Courtland and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's just kind of jump into, your background a little bit and, your journey through industry, how you kind of got to where you're at and, what a couple of things you might have learned along the way. So, walk us through your transition from, Duke Energy and working with the utility on the energy side to data center construction with Brasfield and Gorrie.
Yeah. I have an economic development and electric utility background. Before working for Brasfield and Gorrie, I worked for Duke Energy. I focused on national business recruitment, which is helping power intensive, or large load customers shortlist their sites, by evaluating power availability. And I joined the electric utility business kind of shortly after the pandemic as electrification of industry and all things we know was just skyrocketing forward. I look back at that time and it's crazy. It was kind of the beginning of whale hunting season, so to speak. I mean, you could chart a course in any direction and just you were sure to run into some mammoth size economic development project. And that
Yeah.
kind of sums up how projects looked coming out of the pandemic. But the pandemic was really just an accelerant. Industry was really moving towards electrification before that, but COVID reset global supply chains and, aligned policy incentives and put a spotlight on resiliency and all the other things that demanded more electricity from the grid. So
Yeah.
you sprinkle on there the digitalization of business and AI and, electrification went from a nice to have to kind of a must to have overnight. So in working across Duke's regulated operations in the Southeast and the Midwest, that gave me a kind of a cool, unique perspective on how critical reliable energy is for site selection in general. But it was also really a tumultuous time for the industry, for the electric utility industry. Utilities were responding to that massive load growth, and having to access capital just as inflation had set in. And so
Mm.
some other things compounded that, and that made achieving earnings for a publicly traded company like Duke a little bit more difficult. So as Duke and other publicly traded utilities began to look for ways to navigate that, I also began to kind of navigate into the next stage of my career and ended up looking at construction. Brasfield and Gorrie construction was really a natural step. I wanted to be closer to project delivery. Where
Yeah.
decisions were kind of made on real facilities. I studied urban planning in undergrad and had a career in local and regional economic developments.
Fantastic.
Finding Brasfield and Gorrie was, pure happenstance in a lot of ways, but it was one of the best things to ever happen to me. The people and the culture at this organization is nothing like I really thought existed in the private sector.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's amazing when you really are interested in doing something that those opportunities they present themselves. Your eyes are open to them, and that's great that you've got that sort of intersection of your background and then the energy side of things. Just kind of it was a natural fit. How's it shaped your approach? Having this energy background in terms of evaluating data center projects. How would you say looking through that lens when you're looking at these new projects?
Yeah, economic development has had a huge influence on the way that I approach projects to this day. And, it teaches you not to look at projects as buildings and facilities, but more as drivers for regional growth.
Yeah.
So you have this community lens and you start thinking about all the different things that need to come together for the viability of the long-term operation, not just the immediate construction. There were so many invaluable experiences I had in economic development, particularly the local and the state level, where you really get a chance to change the trajectory of a project. And I think if you in the private sector can identify where those intersections are, you're able to much more successfully navigate, the project. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what initially drew you to focus on these power intensive industries like data centers? I guess you kind of answered that a little bit, but maybe you could expand on that.
yeah, I'm just a curious person by nature. I think economic developers are afforded a broader perspective than most people just because their work demands that you have at least a loose grasp on many different things. So I think if you embrace that, it, bodes well for you. But it's also a career that gives you a front seat to change
Mm,
in the
yeah,
society and what's going on in the economy. And data centers are the most tangible, visible example of how, this digital demand is reshaping infrastructure. And so, it's just really rewarding to work on projects that define the backbone of the economy. And that's exactly where we are with this sector right now.
that's great. That's great. Let's talk a little bit about the market scale and the growth dynamics that you're seeing in the data center space now that you're ensconced in that space. Can you help our audience understand the true scale of modern data center projects?
Yeah. I mean, the, it depends is how I would start that. So it depends on the application. It depends on the facility use. It depends on the customers that are going in there. Uh, and it depends on kind of the scalability and long-term plan for that development. There's certainly um, the ones that you can find at sort of a warehouse scale are far and few between these days. The power and the cooling needs and just the infrastructure it takes to stand up these facilities can look humongous sometimes. A single hyperscale campus can rival the output of a single plant size in terms of
Hmm.
its power demand and complexity. So that's certainly not standard across the board at all projects. And I think, data centers are in a really interesting phase right now where they are having to evolve extremely quickly. And that's where you find a lot of innovation taking place.
Yeah, yeah, I see things all the time about different cooling methods that they're using, whether it's air cooled, liquid cooled, that sort of thing, the security dimensions that have to go into the design, given the data that's there. And it's amazing to me. It's all the different facets of data center. And like you said, what's the application? Who's using it, and how much space do they need, right? How do you characterize the current growth trajectory in data center construction? I guess massive. Is that probably the best word for it?
Yeah, I mean, our
Yeah.
backlog reflects that the fact that demand is not slowing down. We're seeing a really steady acceleration in some parts. Some projects are getting the timelines are getting more aggressive. There's certainly no shortage of limiting factors in terms of the development of these facilities from power to other resources, really seeing steady project growth, and the large operators themselves are working through quite a significant backlog of projects.
Well, yeah, nice problem to have a lot of times. It's better than the opposite, right? Not seeing anything coming in, this big backlog. And what's driving this? What's driving this demand? What are the key, elements that are driving the demand of the growth?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely AI and cloud adoption. Those are
Mhm.
some of the more overarching accelerators. But, every industry is digitalizing today from healthcare to manufacturing, and that all is fueling data demand.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's really important data that's being computed. It's not all image generation and TikTok videos. It's biology research, and it's medical research and personalized healthcare and medicine, and language translation that makes doing business globally a lot easier. It's imaging analysis and just general productivity of knowledge work. So and it's also things like predictive analytics for industrial operations and efficiency. So
Mhm.
across the board, I think AI is driving the boom, certainly, but it's also becoming a core tool in how we, as the construction industry, go about designing and building and putting these facilities into reality. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
it's an interesting time.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the construction and labor element to this, down to the nitty-gritty of how these things actually get built, right? And some of the challenges there. What are the biggest workforce challenges facing data center construction today?
I think everyone would probably say the scarcity of skilled mechanical and electrical trades. Um, that is that's where a lot of the backlog is. The speed of growth kind of means that demand is outpacing training pipelines and abilities these days, and um, that's creating a lot of rub in the specialized trades.
Yeah, we see it too in, our projects as well, on the energy side. It's probably the same people that we're after. It's across the board. How's the shortage of skilled tradespeople impacting your project timelines? You mentioned about backlog. And how much of that is driven by this?
Yeah, I mean, shortages can create scheduling bottlenecks, but and the electrical work is really is a pacing item. But I mean, I think we're all navigating it pretty well. Thankfully, there is what seems like a renewed interest from the workforce in terms of getting into trades.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
We're very active in recruiting on college campuses and other areas, and are finding success in and the staffing needs that we're projecting.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. And so that those are some of the strategies that you're going after in terms of managing the labor constraints, kind of getting early in the pipeline with what partnering maybe with some technical colleges, that sort of thing, trade schools.
The
Is that
talent
part of your
recruitment
strategy?
is definitely one strategy to manage the constraints. I think we're also leaning on speed to market strategies like prefabrication,
Yeah.
and modular construction. Those are practices that our clients likes to see as well. And again, back to the trades. I mean, I think there is an interest from folks in working in these high tech trades, and there's a resurgence and kind of a growing narrative that the trades are high tech again. And so
Yeah.
folks that are interested in working in robotics and AI enabled equipment and advanced construction methods, it's a really attractive time to be getting into that line of work. So, I mean, I think we'll continue to work through the talent needs just like we always have.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about the power and infrastructure constraints that you're encountering, as you try to develop these centers. How are energy availability and transmission constraints affecting data site selection?
Yeah. Energy availability is probably the number one factor shaping site selection right now. And, the tier one markets, places like Northern Virginia and Dallas and Phoenix, transmission, and Atlanta for that matter, transmission constraints are making it harder to bring new capacity online quickly. That's pushing some projects into non-traditional markets. We've seen that over the last few years. Utilities and local leaders are being very proactive, and we're seeing real growth in those kind of secondary regions. But that said, I think the expectation is still that the tier one markets will continue to dominate long term, and the reason is simple. Those markets already have the infrastructure, the interconnection points, and the
Yeah.
scalability that our clients need, that certainly that the hyperscale clients need. So while secondary markets are emerging as important outlets, I think those tier one hubs are going to remain the backbone of the data center industry growth.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes complete sense. What role do utility integrated resource plans play, IRPs, play in your project evaluation process?
They definitely give us a flavor for where utilities are investing in capacity, but they don't really play a role, or they play a very small role in how we evaluate, projects. The projects that come across our desks have to be evaluated on kind of a case by case basis. But if you're looking for a general roadmap on how a region or a utility is deploying capital to meet demand based off of generation or transmission or their fleet mix, the IRP is a great a go-to resource to kind of understand how things are going to be laid out.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And then how are behind the meter solutions and on-site generation changing data center design?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think when development is bottlenecked, like we see, scarcity tends to catalyze innovation, and behind the meter solutions and on-site gen are really reshaping how we think about data center design. Traditionally, data centers were built to plug, straight into the grid and depend on utility infrastructure alone for reliability. What we're seeing now is a shift towards, resiliency and more protections, that directly come from the site itself. So, operators are adding in solar and battery, and no shortage of natural gas turbines, and some kind of sometimes microgrid setups to control their energy destiny. But that changes the design footprint, and oftentimes you need more land or more integration and control systems, and you need to rethink cooling strategies and things like that can force you to adapt to different kinds of generation. But the upside, I think, to on-site gen is two things. It shortens the timeline in many areas to get power online when grid capacity is constrained, obviously, and then it gives operators more control over their energy profile, which I think there's a taste for right now. In some cases,
Yeah.
they're able to guarantee certain types of power at the facility level rather than waiting on the broader grid to deliver that. So, and when you add in all of the different behind the meter systems that we could talk about right now, and there are quite a few, it changes a lot. It changes, your procurement strategy to the project. Instead of a data center being just an electrical and mechanical package, now you're sourcing a host of different things that change that project. And so I think what's happening behind the scenes is those that are chasing on-site gen are really having to evolve as companies and figure
Yeah.
out, if they do want to control their own energy destiny, what does that mean for them as an organization? Because
Yeah.
you're not just growing in one direction. At that level, you're growing in many. It's also for us, I think, we'll continue to see in those more complex projects, clients move towards a design, build, delivery model because they need that speed and integration expertise on those types of projects. They don't want that traditional handoff
Yeah.
model that they've been working with. So yeah, there's a lot changing in that space, but clearly it is something that the industry is thinking about pretty heavily.
Yeah, yeah, that resiliency and control issue is huge, particularly, given, the grid is experiencing some instability here and there, with all the loads that are put on it nowadays, population growth, the data centers, the electric cars, you name it. It's all happening at once, and, trying to keep up and the ability to have energy on site that you can control and that you can smooth out those bumps that happen right from the grid is super important. We know that very well in our business, and yeah, that's a great point. Let's talk a little bit about technology evolution and adaptation. Let's get a little forward looking here on the technology side. How quickly is AI demand changing data center design requirements during construction?
Yeah, I'd say we have, decent access to decisions that are being made along the course of a project. But the design is really, I would say that flexibility is kind of the rule of design in these
Gotcha.
projects, right? We build in extra capacity. We account for things like modularity and phase development strategies so that we can help clients pivot midstream without losing schedule. So
That's great.
it's a matter of balancing and building in flexibility to the schedule. And there's so many different things that could change the trajectory of a project. Certainly power densities and client demands that are looking at these spaces as they're being planned have the potential to change a ton of different things. And you've just got to, be leaning on your resume of projects and understanding when those inflection points can be and plan, for everything accordingly.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. What new cooling technologies and water management systems are you seeing implemented?
Yeah, so this is an area that's very much outside of my research or expertise, but cooling is probably the most active area of
Hmm.
innovation, I would say, in data centers right now. If I'm reading the tea leaves right, if you just look at the hyperscale operators themselves, you can see that there has been ubiquitous adoption of water positive goals, right? The idea of restoring more water than the company consumes. With AI workloads driving up, rack densities and traditional air cooling not being able to keep up on a lot of pace, we are seeing liquid cooling move from pilot stage to more of the mainstream. Um, and more discussion around closed loop water systems to really minimize usage. So I would be I don't have a crystal ball, but I have a hard time imagining with the scale in which this industry is building right now that doesn't become kind of table stakes
Yeah.
for some of these larger developers down the road.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's a lot of early in my career, I worked for Dell Computer, and I was in the side of things, server and storage side, the different, not energy storage, data storage, and yeah, thermal management was the biggest thing that we'd deal with, and so yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. Let's look to the future here, future outlook and market predictions. Well, let's get the crystal ball out a little bit and see what you think might be happening, Courtland. What will the next 1 to 2 years look like for data center construction demand?
Yeah, I love crystal balling it. Um,
Yeah, let's do it.
if we look at AI capex, right now. And you can look at it a ton of different ways. But if you look at AI spending as a share of the economy over the next 2 years, AI spending is going to be a huge tailwind. It's going to continue to drive hundreds of billions of dollars from hyperscalers alone, right? And then you've
Yeah,
got everybody else in this space as well. The story here, though, I think is really, if you want to try to read the tea leaves, Howard, is really in the mega cap kind of companies. It's in the large cap companies, the those blue chip folks that you see on Wall Street. And what reports are saying is, they're showing that these companies are going to spend 300 and 50 billion this year, and closer to probably 400 or 500 billion next year on AI spending.
unbelievable.
That's enough to say that there's going to take a long time for this to
Yeah,
burn through the pipeline, and to get all this built. That AI spending is still somewhat of a rounding error share of our total output as a country, as our GDP. That the glide path really points towards acceleration, and I think that's where the story is. That's what's interesting to me is um, the pushing through all of these constraints. But what we're really doing is fundamentally changing how this supports the broader business community in the US and across the world.
that's fantastic. Yeah. How are site availability challenges reshaping where data centers can be built? You kind of alluded to that a little bit, for the tier one markets. Is there anything that sort of more on a micro scale that you could add there?
Well, yeah, so obviously sites with um both the land and the power, and everything else that goes into that site selection model is becoming scarce. And what we've seen is not just a push into non-traditional markets, but a push into traditionally uncharacteristic sites, right? So more difficult sites, more costly to develop sites. And then at the same time, you've got generative design that's reshaping how we analyze that site feasibility and the speed in which a site can be assessed and characterized and analyzed for development. So there's there's a lot happening in terms of developing new layouts. I mean, we're seeing certainly more multi-story data centers than I think we have in the past. In some cases, it's because they're working with a constrained site, and in other cases, it's because that's been a successful model for the developers.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. The multi-story thing, I didn't think about that, but yeah, that's you got to maximize the footprint, so you got to go up sometimes. Final question for the podcast today. What new partnerships or capabilities is your company developing to stay ahead of market demands?
Question.
Give away the competitive jewels there. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I'll give away this. I'm confident that we are going to continue to invest in people. I'm confident that we're going to continue to invest in talent and careers and trades. It's people that bring these projects to life, and it's people that bridge, the possibilities that we see in the early stages of project design with the reality of these facilities being built. There's no question that we're going to, continue growing our talent pool to respond to what we're seeing in the market right now. We'll certainly have opportunities for deeper collaboration with AI cloud clients to kind of understand future developments earlier on. I think that's, again, back to different procurement models. I think that's the direction where the scale of development's going. We probably going to continue to see investment in places like prefabrication and modular construction techniques that help our clients stay on schedule as this industry really pushes forward on timeline. We're focusing more on procurement, and how we can help our clients de-risk all those, the purchasing of that critical path to the ultimate deployment. And there's no doubt in my mind that we'll be using some next generational digital tools to keep pace with the volume that we're seeing in this market sector right now. So we're looking at all that, and from the small pieces that I've seen in my time here, I'm really excited about where that's going.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much. That concludes the podcast. It was great to learn more about data centers. I learned a lot today that I didn't know. and our audience, I'm sure, is appreciative. I mean, everybody's hearing about these data centers, everybody's hearing about the growth of AI, but to talk to somebody with their feet on the ground and, working with this day to day and how it all comes together has been very illuminating. So very much appreciate it, Courtland. It's Courtland Robinson with Brasfield and Gorrie, and we thank you for your time today, and we thank the audience for listening today. And that concludes the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.